Michael Morton left for his shift at a grocery store at 6 in the morning on August 13th, 1986. By 9 a.m., his wife, Christine, was dead, found beaten in their master bedroom in Williamson County, Texas. For the next 25 years, the state insisted Michael was the only person who could have done this. But while Michael sat in a cell, the evidence that actually pointed to the real killer was sitting in a box, hidden by the very people meant to uphold the law. Tonight, we're taking a look at the case of Michael Morton, from a hidden blue bandana to the eventual DNA match that changed Texas law forever. It's August 13th, 1986, in Williamson County, Texas. This is a quiet area that sits just north of Austin, and at the time still felt like, the beginnings of suburbia. The Mortons lived on North Creek Drive, one of those middle-class streets where people still waved from driveways and knew which cars belonged to who, etc. It wasn't rural, it wasn't busy, it was just steady, normal. Michael Morton had turned 32 the day before. He and his wife, Christine, had gone out to dinner the previous night to celebrate his birthday. After that, they came home and put their 3-year-old, Eric, to bed. The next morning, Michael left early, around 6, for his shift managing a grocery store in Austin. Just a normal, regular day. Or so he thought. Around 8:30 to 9 a.m., the neighbor across the street saw something that didn't fit this normal at all. Little Eric was standing outside alone. Nothing seemed to be wrong with him, aside from the fact that he was by himself. Maybe he had gotten out of the house and his mom didn't know. So the neighbor walked him to the house. The front door was cracked just a little bit, and brought him inside. And she called out for Christine as she walked in. The house looked normal. Nothing seemed to be broken or chaotic, but it was very still and very quiet. As she walked around looking for Christine, she finally came to the master bedroom, where she found her, lying on the bed in pools of blood, beaten to death. I can't imagine what went through her head at that moment. The shock of it all, the heart-wrenching thought that this poor boy may have been witness to such a terrible image or even the act. She called the sheriff. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly what she felt because in the records, the police keep it pretty clinical. There's no quotes from her about fear or intuition, no "I had a bad feeling" statements. Just found the body, called it in, done. But here's the thing. No one called Michael. Let me repeat that. No one called Christine's husband. He was still at work in Austin, managing his store, thinking it was just another Wednesday. When his shift ended, he drove home, pulled into his street, and saw patrol cars, yellow tape, neighbors standing on their lawns watching what was going on. Sheriff Jim Boutwell met him in the driveway and told Michael that Christine was gone. He met him outside. He didn't take him in the house, just told him Christine was gone. The word dead was not used, not at first, according to Michael. Just the word gone. He said he thought maybe she had an accident, that she'd been taken to the hospital. When he finally did find out what happened to his wife, he felt confused and stunned and disconnected from what was happening. One of his first thoughts was, where was Eric? Where was his son? And he was told that Eric was with family. Police had called Christine's mother right away. She lived close, and she came immediately to get Eric. The scene inside the house, inside that bedroom, was brutal. But whatever did happen inside that house seemed to have happened just right there in the bedroom. And deputies did what they were supposed to do, at least at first. The sliding glass door at the back of the Morton house opened up to the backyard, the fenced backyard, which then backed up to a wooded area. This sliding glass door was unlocked. There was no damage to the door. There were no pry marks, no broken glass. It would later be learned that this door was often left unlocked to let the dog in and out. And yes, there was a dog, but it's barely noted in any file. There's no report of the dog barking, attacking, or even going outside with Eric when he wandered out that morning. As officers looked for evidence, one officer saw a blue bandana about 100 yards from the back of the Morton's house. It was sitting on the edge of a curb in front of a home that was under construction. An officer found it and saw that it appeared to have bloodstains on it. He made note of it in his report, but he didn't collect it. And yeah, I can hear you already. You know how this works. You know you don't just notice something like that and walk away. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. It's not complicated. Christine's brother, her brother, went to the site himself, picked up the bandana, and turned this over to the state. It was logged, it was sent to DPS, the Department of Public Safety, and it was confirmed to have human blood on it, and then it was shelved. Behind the fence line of the Morton house was a single shoe impression, and it appeared to be an athletic shoe print around a men's size 10.5. And it appeared fresh enough to still be visible. The police noted it in their reports. They didn't cast it with plaster. They didn't compare it to Michael Morton's shoes and didn't track it at all beyond just jotting down that it was found. They took fingerprints from inside the house and from the rear sliding glass door. They also took prints on the areas outside of the house near this same door. There was one thing missing from the house: Christine's purse. Later, Michael would tell deputies that a handgun was also missing. And what else they found? They found a note in the bathroom on the counter. And this note was from Michael to his wife, Christine, whom he called Chris. This is what it said. "Chris, I know you didn't mean to, but you made me feel really unwanted last night. After a good meal, we came home, you binged on the rest of the cookies. Then, with your nightgown around your waist and while I was rubbing your hands and arms, you farted and fell asleep. I'm not mad or expecting a big production. I just wanted you to know how I feel without us getting into another fight about sex. Just think how you might have felt if you were left hanging on your birthday. ILY," and then it's signed M. Within 48 hours, there were more clues. Neighbors had called in saying that there was a man in a green van parked behind the Morton's house during the week of the murder. This van would park in the same spot over and over, and it would park near that strip of woods that ran behind the Morton's house. Two neighbors said that this man parked, got out of the van, and disappeared into the trees. Deputies wrote it down. They're really good at just writing stuff down. There was never any check on this van. Nothing. Then someone tried to use Christine's Visa card at a jewelry store called the Jewel Box in San Antonio, and this is about an hour and a half away. A San Antonio officer said he believed he could identify the woman who used the card. It was noted, yet again, and to this day, we still don't know who she was. There's no record of any attempt at interviewing the staff at the jewelry store, no follow-up with the San Antonio officer, no following of the trail. Then 9 days later, a forged check turned up in Christine's name. This is not pursued. There's no documented attempt to pull bank surveillance, nothing. And then after all this, absolutely nothing else. It just goes quiet. Are you feeling ticked off yet? I know I am. Then there was Eric. 3 years old. But he talked, and he talked to his grandmother, Rita. And he said a monster with a big mustache had hurt his mommy and that his daddy wasn't home. So Rita did what you're supposed to do. She called down to the sheriff's office. She called Sergeant Don Wood and told him exactly what Eric had said. Wood wrote it up and put it in the file. And Rita was discouraged from repeating it, told in so many words that it was a child's story and the case was already clear. So she trusted them. And for the next 25 years, no one asked her again. Can you see where this is going? Remember how Christine's brother had gone back to the scene and found the bandana and then turned it over? In 1986, DNA testing wasn't standard, but basic blood typing was. No blood typing was ever done on it. They logged it and left it. If anyone had tested it, they would have seen two things: Christine's blood and hair and another man's DNA entirely. But that truth wouldn't surface for another quarter century. By the end of the summer, the investigation had stopped looking, period. The green van, it was ignored. The credit card fraud, ignored. The child's statement, filed and forgotten. The bandana, in storage, but that's it. Every clue that pointed to someone else was left on the table, and every question about what really happened inside that house got reduced to one answer. The husband did it. By then, the sheriff's office wasn't running an investigation anymore. You really couldn't even call this an investigation, right? They were running confirmation. They decided it was Michael, and everything after that just had to fit. No more testing, no more chasing leads. They knew, or thought they did. They had the note, right? And ego did the rest. That's where the focus stayed until September 25th, 1986, when deputies arrested Michael Morton for the murder of his wife. And from that moment on, the story stopped being about evidence and it became about conviction. By the time Michael was arrested, barely 6 weeks had passed since Christine's murder. August to September, that's all it took for the Williamson County Sheriff's Office to decide that their case was closed. And the trial moved fast. It happened in February of 1987, just 6 months later. To put this into some kind of context, cases like these usually take about 12 to 24 months, sometimes even longer, because, they have stuff they have to test, right? And his trial was held in the same county with the same detectives and all through the same lens that only saw Michael as the suspect. The district attorney, Ken Anderson, personally handled this case. And keep that name in mind, because it will be very important later. Their story? That Michael did it because he had argued with Christine the night before, because she'd refused sex on his birthday. That he killed her in anger before heading off to work the next morning. And their proof? The handwritten note found on the counter in the bathroom. That was their motive. There's no history of violence, no witnesses to say this was an explosive marriage. There was no weird or unusual behavior that day when he was at work. Just a note. And a hell of a lot more evidence that was never followed up on. As far as they were concerned, they had their man. And now all they needed was a timeline. The prosecution didn't have a weapon, a confession. They didn't have a neighbor who heard something. So they leaned on what they did have, a possible time of death based on Christine's stomach contents. Dr. Bayardo, the Travis County medical examiner, testified that because undigested food, mushrooms, tomatoes, olives, and squash, was found in Christine's stomach, she must have died before 6 a.m. when Michael was still home. That sounds scientific until you realize that digestion isn't on its own personal clock, right? It's not the same for everybody. It varies with sleep, it varies with stress, with temperature, anything. But the prosecution needed that 6 a.m. window to make their timeline work. So that's what they leaned on. And remember that gun that was missing? During trial, they said that the missing purse and the missing handgun were part of a staged burglary meant to mislead the investigators. And all those things we talked about earlier, the green van, the forged check, the credit card use, the statement from Eric, the bandana, it all existed in a file that the trial judge had ordered the prosecution to share. Judge William Lott told DA Ken Anderson to turn over anything that might help the defense. Ken Anderson told the judge that there was nothing there that could help the defense. He did hand over some information, Michael's own statements to deputies, and he kept the rest locked away. So what did Michael actually say? Well, Michael told investigators that on August 12th, he and Christine went out to dinner for his birthday, came home, watched TV, an adult video according to police notes, and went to bed around 10 o'clock. He said Christine fell asleep while he was rubbing her hands and arms, and then he left for work early the next morning, around 5:30 to 6 a.m. He said he worked a full shift managing a Safeway grocery store in Austin. He left work and came home to find the police at his house. And he learned from Sheriff Jim Boutwell that Christine was quote-unquote gone. He described confusion and shock and said no one had called him at work during the day. And as far as that unlocked sliding glass door, he mentioned that this sliding glass door was often left unlocked to let their dog in and out. This detail supported his later claim that an intruder could have entered that way. He also told deputies that Christine's purse and one of his handguns were missing, suggesting a burglary. He said that he left the house as usual that morning. He had made coffee, turned off the porch light, and drove straight to work. And coworkers later confirmed his normal demeanor. He did not seem to be acting out of the ordinary. This is all that the prosecution turned over. The jury never heard about the bandana, the man in the green van, statements from Eric, at least not the details of it. Because when you control the narrative, you control the case, right? Of course, the defense pushed back. They argued that Christine was alive after Michael left, that someone had come into the house later that morning, and they pointed to the missing items, the door that was unlocked, and the physical evidence that didn't match Michael. The defense was fully aware that the back door was unlocked and that there were unidentified prints that was in the general police documentation. They knew that Christine's purse and handgun were missing. They knew of the existence of a possible bloody bandana near the house only because it was briefly mentioned in a deputy's field report. But no follow-up testing, photos, lab results, anything was ever shared, if they did any of the work at all. The defense had fragments of information. That's all. The trial lasted for 7 days, and the jury came back within 2 hours with a guilty verdict. Life in prison. Michael was told he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. How scary is that? All of this evidence, this piss-poor job of investigating, leads you to be locked up for life in prison. And getting into prison is far easier than it is getting out, as we'll see. When Michael Morton entered the Texas prison system in 1987, he was 32 years old, the same age Christine had been when she died. He went from a grocery store manager in a quiet suburb to inmate number 66203. While in prison, he kept himself busy and functional. He studied. He earned a BA in psychology. Later, he earned an MA in literature. He read constantly, philosophy, literature, theology. all the while filing motion after motion after motion, insisting that he was innocent. And the courts repeatedly denied him, saying there was nothing new, which was technically true if you define new as the evidence the state refused to share. For more than a decade, Michael's appellate attorneys had zero access to the full case file. When it was requested, Williamson County courts repeatedly denied requests to open the investigative records. Then, in the early 2000s, after Texas created its post-conviction DNA testing statute, also called Chapter 64, in 2001, Michael's pro bono attorneys began to re-examine his file. This statute created a legal process for convicted people in Texas to request DNA testing on physical evidence from their case, even years after their conviction, if that evidence could potentially prove their innocence. And before this, there was no such thing in place. Your only route was appeal. Around 2004, Michael's got a new legal team, which included attorney John Raley of Houston, who was also working with Nina Morrison of the Innocence Project. They combed the evidence logs and police reports where they found this note about a blue bandana, quote, recovered behind the Morton residence, unquote. That's when they knew that there was untested biological evidence that the defense had never been told about. So Michael's defense team then files motions based on these findings, and in February 2005, filed a motion for DNA testing under Chapter 64. The current Williamson County DA, John Bradley, who had replaced Anderson, the one who tried Michael's case, fought this for years. And I wonder why. Did he know something? Was he protecting Anderson? This DA, John Bradley, called it grasping at straws and muddying the waters. And the district court initially denied this testing. The DA continued to deny this testing, arguing in court that it would confuse things, as if, the truth were some kind of distraction. Michael's team appealed, and in November of 2009, the Texas Court of Appeals finally reversed that denial and ordered testing of that bandana. By this time, Michael had been in prison for nearly 23 years. In 2010, the case was then reassigned to Judge Sid Harrell out of San Antonio's Bexar County to supervise the evidence handling and the DNA testing. Now, why was it reassigned, you might ask? I know I was curious. Well, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, the state's highest criminal court, had already ordered that the bandana be tested and that Michael's case be re-examined in light of possible Brady violations. And these Brady violation, or a Brady violation, is when the prosecution hides evidence that could clear the defendant. In plain terms, it's cheating. Everyone in Williamson County, the DA's office, the sheriff's department, even local judges, had some prior connection to the original case or the people involved. Ken Anderson, the guy who had prosecuted Michael's case, was now a district judge. Let that sink in the same courthouse. The new DA, John Bradley, was actively fighting Michael's DNA requests. Talk about a good old boys network. So the Court of Criminal Appeals effectively said this can't be handled by anyone in Williamson County. Judge Sid Harrell then took over, and he ordered the Williamson County Sheriff's Office to unseal its investigative files. Not just bits and pieces, but everything. Inside those files was the transcript of Eric's statement, the one where he told his grandmother that a monster with a mustache hurt his mom while his dad was gone. There were also the reports from the neighbors about a man in a green van behind the Mortons' fence line that week. The information from San Antonio police about Christine's credit card being used 2 days after her death, and then a forged check a week later. All of it had been withheld from the defense in 1987. That same year, Judge Harrell signed the order to allow the testing of the bandana. It wasn't until mid-2010 to 2011 that the bandana finally went to an independent lab. And in June of 2011, the results came in. On the bandana was Christine's blood and the blood of an unknown male. All of this took about a year and a half from the order to do this, to lab results. Nearly 25 years after the murder. So what about this unknown male DNA? Well, this was uploaded to CODIS, which was now available. It's now 2011, and it got a hit on Mark Allen Norwood, a 57-year-old construction worker and drifter who had prior burglary arrests and lived about 12 miles from the Mortons' home in 1986. Here's the thing. This match didn't just connect him to Christine's murder. It also connected him to another murder in 1988 of Deborah Baker in Austin. Had Christine's case been investigated properly, it would be Norwood who would have been arrested, and Deborah Baker would still be alive. Deborah's case had the same MO, same kind of neighborhood, same kind of attack, both women beaten to death. And here's the kicker. Just months before this DNA test, the parole board had offered Michael an early release if he'd just say he was sorry. Admit guilt, show remorse, and we'll consider it. Consider it. He said no. He'd already lost his wife, his son, right, and a quarter of his life to a lie. On October 4th, 2011, a courtroom finally did what logic should have done decades earlier. Judge Sid Harrell signed an order releasing Michael Morton based on the DNA results from that blue bandana. After 25 years inside, the same courthouse that once called him a murderer now watched him walk out free. He didn't make a speech. He didn't yell. He just said one sentence that really, really sums this up. I thank God this wasn't a capital case. That line stopped everyone because he wasn't exaggerating. This was a literal statement. If prosecutors had gone for the death penalty in 1987, Michael Morton would have been executed before anyone ever touched that bandana. The next day, Judge Harrell spoke directly to Michael in open court and apologized, saying, "You do have my sympathies." Then came the apologies from those who were actually involved in his conviction or denial of testing in one way or another. But seriously, how does an apology make up for 25 years in prison? John Bradley, the DA who kept blocking the DNA testing for years, told reporters, "I was wrong." Ken Anderson, the now judge, but prior DA before Bradley, the one who prosecuted Michael's case and told a judge, strike that, lied to a judge that he didn't have any exculpatory evidence, released a written statement. And it said, "I want to formally apologize for the system's failure to Mr. Morton." He didn't say his failure. He said the system's. Deflect much? That wording mattered because even in apology, the instinct was still to spread the blame on anything else but him. 2 months later, on December 19th, 2011, Judge Harrell entered the final order, a formal acquittal for Michael. The conviction was vacated, the record cleared, and for the first time in a quarter century, the official version of the story matched the truth. You'd think that would have been the end. But that same evidence, the reports, the transcript, the bandana, had done more than clear Michael. It had revealed how much had been hidden to convict him in the first place. Because this isn't the end of the story. Everyone now wants to know who kept the truth out of that courtroom and why. In early 2012, Judge Sid Harrell, same judge who signed Michael Morton's release, petitioned the Texas Supreme Court to open a court of inquiry in Michael's case. And this is Texas's version of a legal autopsy. It's a judge-led investigation to find out if a public official broke the law on the job. The Supreme Court approved it and appointed Judge Lewis Stearns out of Tarrant County to preside. Now, Anderson, remember, is now a sitting judge after being the prosecuting DA in Michael's case. I wonder if him winning that case helped him with becoming a judge. This kind of investigation was rare, a judge investigating another judge for misconduct that had sent an innocent man to prison for 25 years. The hearing took place in 2013 in Williamson County, the same courthouse where Michael had been convicted. How ironic. The purpose was to see if Anderson, as DA in 1987, intentionally concealed exculpatory evidence and defrauded the court. Under oath, various witnesses took the stand. Records were introduced that showed that Anderson had withheld multiple key items from Michael's defense. Witnesses, get this, even described how Anderson had kept key deputies off of the stand so their notes wouldn't have to be turned over. Makes your stomach turn, doesn't it? The court reviewed the same reports that were unsealed in 2010, the green van sightings, the San Antonio credit card, the forged check, the typed transcript of Eric's eyewitness statement. Every one of those documents had existed during the trial. Every one had been withheld from the defense. And Anderson claimed that the items like the statement from Eric, at the time, little Eric, about the monster in the house, or the reports of a green van, or Christine's missing credit card and her check activity after the murder, were either not credible or not required to be turned over. He had to be shitting bricks right about now. Judge Stearns called his explanations, excuses are what they really are, completely contrary to his duty as a prosecutor. In other words, Anderson had intentionally concealed evidence and defrauded the trial court. When it was all said and done, Judge Stearns issued a written finding that Anderson had intentionally hid evidence and committed contempt of court. This was then referred for criminal prosecution and bar discipline. So Anderson, who now has his own legal team, said that the statute of limitations had expired. All those years of delays had effectively kept him safe from most criminal charges. Was this done on purpose? We don't know, but my gut says yes. What a dick. On November 8th, 2013, Anderson pleaded guilty to criminal contempt of court. The more serious charges, like tampering with evidence, were dropped as part of the plea deal. His sentence was 10 days in jail. He served 5. The same system that took 25 years to admit it was wrong gave Ken Anderson 5 days in jail. 5 days. For every year Michael spent inside, Anderson only served about 5 hours. If that doesn't tell you where accountability ends and privilege begins, nothing will. Yep. Feel free to swear at will. I'll wait. He had to perform 500 hours of community service and pay a $500 fine. He did also lose his law license permanently, so I guess there's that. He resigned from his position as a judge in Williamson County as well. And this too was strategic, I'm sure. He was facing judicial removal by the state commission on judicial conduct. And by resigning voluntarily, He avoided this formal process. The reason this is important: often, if you resign, you are allowed to keep accrued retirement benefits or pensions. Now, I don't know if this was the case with him, but had he been removed by the Judicial Conduct Commission instead, he likely would have lost his judicial pension outright. When he walked out after his hearing, reporters asked if he had anything to say to Michael Morton. He didn't say a word. Again, Dick. One good thing that came out of this, though, is that Michael's case led to what became known as the Michael Morton Act. This is a Texas law requiring prosecutors to share their entire case files with the defense. It took a quarter century and one wrongful conviction to make honesty mandatory. I always thought that was a given, but, call me naive. And nationally, the case became a training example. Law schools started using State of Texas versus Michael Morton as a case study in prosecutorial ethics. Some prosecutors took the lesson to heart. Others took it as a cautionary tale about getting caught. Michael rebuilt a quiet life after his release. He remarried. He reconnected with his son, Eric. He wrote about what it takes to hold on to your sanity when the state insists you're guilty. And he writes about this in Getting Life, an innocent man's 25-year journey from prison to peace. This was written in 2014. And in this book, he takes you through the day of the murder, all the way through his exoneration. And you can find this on Amazon if you're interested. So did Michael ever get anything more than an apology? Yes, he did, as he should. In Texas, there's a law called the Tim Cole Act. This is another exoneree that says people who are wrongfully convicted and later exonerated are entitled to state compensation. As of 2011, when Michael was free, the law said he should get $80,000 for each year of wrongful imprisonment, plus an annuity for life and tuition assistance and state health benefits similar to those for employees. He was awarded roughly $2 million in total compensation, and he used this money to support his son Eric and fund advocacy and reform efforts through the Innocence Project of Texas. So what about Norwood, the guy who actually did commit the crime? Well, after his arrest in 2011, he pleaded not guilty, not surprising. He sat in jail for about 17 months, and the trial for Christine's murder began in March of 2013 and ended with a guilty verdict on March 27th, 2013. So this was a really, really short trial. His sentence, life in prison. But what about the other woman, Deborah, the one that he killed after Christine? A trial for this case happened in 2016, and again, another guilty verdict and another life sentence. He will be eligible for parole, which is, beyond my understanding. But I guess if anything good comes of this, and if he does get granted parole, I doubt it, but if he does, he'll be in his 80s. In the end, Michael Morton's story isn't just about one man. It's about what happens when the people in charge stop doing their jobs because they believe they already know the truth. Christine Morton lost her life. Michael lost 25 years. Their son Eric lost both. The same evidence that could have cleared him sat in a box while the real killer walked free and took another life. That's not the system failing. That's the system doing what it does when winning matters more than the truth. Michael's free now. He's rebuilt what he can and pushed for laws that might keep this from happening again. But the state's check didn't make it right. And 5 days in jail for the person who caused this doesn't make it justice. As a matter of fact, it's kind of stomach churning, isn't it? That's all for this episode. Next episode, we're going to head west to Malibu, where 24-year-old Matrice Richardson vanished after being taken into police custody. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. Bye for now.